Two of you who don't know Father Hugh, he's actually at present chaplain at Westminster Cathedral and at St. Elizabeth Hospital, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right, yeah.
He has been a professor of philosophy at the local seminary and editor of the Faith magazine as well. So we welcome him.
So and thanks for this title, Can Robots Love? And that was my title, as Andrea said, and he's added in a subtitle. I've slightly changed the subtitle. It's a bit naughty of me there, perhaps, to what I hope you can see now. I'm just going to see if I can just get the screen. I hope you can see everything now. Instead of the spirituality, the spiritual nature of human love in the light of modern science. It's a sort of an argument about human love, this one, really, just to suggest that computers, therefore, can't love. It's an interesting application of a reflection on the nature of human love, perhaps an unusual one, but it's relevant today, and it does throw light on the nature of the human person as well, in a way that I think is important for today. And I'm just going to make that point to start with. That's point number one, and there's really sort of one other point that goes on a little bit, try and keep it to 35 minutes. That is to say, a four-step argument concluding no, robots can't love. I've put in some objections at each step. We may have time just to very briefly go through objections to each of the four steps in the argument in order to clarify them. So the first thing, why it is important, and the main reason that it is important, is that here's this point here, that increasing amounts of significant people are saying, yes, robots can love. Elon Musk is one of them. He was actually in the news last week. I've just put up something here. He actually put a chip inside a pig brain, and they got some amazing graphs as the pig walked on a treadmill, which captured what they would predict, I think, from the mapping of the various parts of the pig. The signals in the brain matched that. So I suppose that proves something, not quite sure what, but Elon Musk thinks that human beings are just clever computers. There was a Japanese professor who has been at the two fairly recent Vatican conferences on artificial intelligence, one just before lockdown, and he's very clear that robots, he thinks, are spiritual things. The cleverer they get, and he's produced a robot that looks like himself, and he even sends to conferences to give talks when he can't. And here's a little video from a BBC journalist that's done quite a bit of work on this. He's a Catholic, actually, he's a journalist. Here's a little word from her about the Google head engineer, what he's been saying about artificial intelligence and robots.
So this is Ray Kurzweil, and he's the chief engineer at Google and a prominent futurist. He has said that by 2029, so that's only in 9 years' time, computers will achieve human-level intelligence. He says that we are spiritual machines. He calls the smartphone an extension of our brain. He says our brain is already expanding in the cloud, and that we will directly connect our neocortexes to the cloud by the 2030s. So this will be able to expand our brains without limit. He sees a future where we have nanorobotics. So these are robots the size of blood cells with computers in them that will go into the brain through our capillaries and communicate with our neurons. This also will communicate wirelessly to the cloud. And at one point, humans will be able to access millions of computers worth of information. And he sees many advantages to having a much faster interface with these nanobots in our body. He also thinks they'll be able to cure diseases. And by 2045, he talks that we will have achieved singularity. So this is where human biological intelligence is surpassed by machine and artificial intelligence, which he says will only continue to improve itself with its intelligence.
Okay, so that's just a little overview on the fact that they're charging ahead with artificial intelligence on the basis that there's nothing to stop them becoming like human beings. Now, it's important to check this claim we need to know that when something that we might meet on the street says, I love you, that it is telling the truth and not an inevitable utterance determined by a preset program. Just to make this point about how important this is, I think we all know love is what makes the world go round. It's the meaning of human life. And therefore, when love is communicated to us, it is important that it's true and indeed freely given. Just to make this point, I just want to have a little look at a quick clip from a film called The Truman Show. Just about a minute long, so if you haven't seen it and you don't want to have it spoiled for you, the spoiler alert is that this is really the heart of the film, I think. The key character, a guy called Truman, is finding himself becoming frighteningly solipsistic. That is to say, he's beginning to think the whole world just revolves around him and is set up for him. And so he's getting depressed about this, and he has a chat with his best friend. And here is the chat with the person he feels is closest to him in the whole world. This is the little clip from The Truman Show. Big spoiler alert on this one.
You're the closest thing I ever had to a brother, Truman. I know that things haven't really worked out for either of us like we used to dream they would. I know that feeling when it's like everything's slipping away and you don't want to believe it, so you look for answers somewhere else,
Well, the point is, I'd gladly walk in front of traffic for you.
the point is, I would gladly step in front of traffic for you, Truman.
And the last thing I'd ever do is lie to you.
The last thing that I would ever do is lie to you. I mean, think about it, Truman. If everybody is in on it, I'd have to be in on it too.
Okay, so that's just a little clip there in which it's revealed to the film watchers. I think if you're a bright person, you probably knew already, but I didn't actually when I watched that film. That was the moment when I realized that everybody's been given a script, particularly in deep conversations, by a sort of director, and it's all a TV program. The only guy who doesn't know is Truman. And that is a chilling situation. Why is this chilling? Why is it so horrible to find that someone who is claimed for 30 years to have been a close friend of someone is just not telling the truth? And I think it's because true love is freely given. It's the worst lie ever to claim that when you, to claim that you are just, to claim that when you are just obeying orders. It's the worst lie to claim that I have true love for you when I'm actually just reading a script that is programmed into me. And my point in this talk is that modern artificial intelligence is risking this. Without carefully considering what love is and getting it right, we are playing upon the human need for friendship. Humans have insecurities in this area and abilities to ascribe freedom and goodness where it is false to do so. As if you know another film, The Matrix, where Neo here is given a choice of the red pill, which is going to be a hard life, but the truth about life, or a blue pill, which is going to be comforting, nice feelings, but it won't be the truth. Which pill do you take? Its truth is important. Truth is important more important than comfort. And so I would say that artificial intelligence needs to do a lot more work in trying to understand what human love is and get it right. Here is the Catholic answer given just in June this year by the Commission of the Bishops' Conference of the European Union. The Christian perspective, they say, the bishop sees the human person as qualitatively different from other beings, with a transcendent dignity, intelligent and free, and capable, therefore, of moral acts. AI systems are not free in the sense the human person is, and in this sense its acts cannot be judged according to the moral criteria that are applied to human acts. And it gives a reference to a document by the Pontifical Academy of Sciences 1 year earlier, which said that most maintain that robots cannot be considered as persons, so robots will not and should not be free agents or possess rights. Christian philosophy and theology states that the human soul is intrinsically incorruptible. This is the metaphysical foundation according to which the human person is in himself or herself free and capable of ethical order. So this is the Christian vision of the human person. We are body and soul. We're more than just matter. We're free. We're able to give of ourselves. But we do need to sort of show that. It says here, most maintain, and it says Christian philosophy states this, but it's important that we're able to engage with Elon Musk and the head of Google engineering and that Japanese professor and many others in our culture to be able to defend rationally that we have a human soul, ultimately, that we are more than matter. So here is an attempt to do that, to defend the answer to the question, no, robots cannot love. An important question. So this is really the second part of the talk and the rest of the talk. Now, I'm just presenting an argument here in the form of a syllogism. You may know what a syllogism is from logic. It's something like, the classic one is Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. If you accept the premises that Socrates is a man and all men are mortal, then you must accept the conclusion Socrates is mortal. That is, so if you have a valid syllogism, you have to accept the conclusion. So here is a syllogism that I think is valid, leaving the only question is whether the premises are right. There's actually 3 syllogisms here. Here's the first one. Matter is not free. Humans have free will. Therefore, human free will is not a material power. That's the first syllogism. You can disagree with that conclusion, but only by disagreeing with one of the premises, i.e. matter is not free or humans have free will. The second syllogism takes this conclusion, puts it with the third premise. So human free will is not a material power. Love is freely willing the good of the other. Therefore, loving is not a material power. And that goes with the fourth premise. Loving is not a material power. Robots are purely material things. Therefore, robots cannot love. Okay, that is the conclusion there. Hello, everything all right? Yep, okay. So there we are, that's actually 3 syllogisms. Again, you have to disagree with either number 1, 2, 3, or 4 if you're going to say that robots can love. So we're just going to shoot through these 4 premises now, just to defend them. The first of the 4 premises, matter is not free. Matter, by the way, is that which is sensed by humans, you know, the objects of our 5 senses, which sort of make sense to us. And this stuff, which we call matter energy in modern science, the more we understand matter, the more we can predict it. That's what's been discovered in the technological rise. Hello? Mobile phones work well. Actions of physical things are determined by the thing's nature and its environment. So first, mobile phones work well. Whenever we pick up a mobile phone, it does amazing things for us because it's understood, and matter is deterministic. We can predict what it does. Actions of physical things are determined by the thing's nature and its environment. That's a sort of, I suppose, a slightly more scientific way of putting it. Either way, we would say of material things that in as much as we experience them at the normal level of our 5 senses, it could not have been otherwise. Okay, so that's the claim that matter is not free. Here's a couple of common objections. Material things may have freedom because what about quantum mechanics? They can allow uncaused events. And another possible objection is clever animals might be non-determined and even intelligently choosing. And in response to those two objections, in response to that, in the first one, in terms of the quantum mechanics thing, if that's low level stuff, it's very low level, it's probabilistic. We could have discussions about that if you want. But just to point out that we're just talking about at the normal level of human sensation, things are deterministic. Okay, being uncaused anyway does not mean intelligent freedom, of course, which is the second premise we're going to come to in a moment. The further second objection to that first premise, that clever animals might be non-determined and even intelligently choosing. And I would say that in terms of modern science, one of the ways in which we can determine and understand that something is predictable, even a clever animal, is that it exists within ecological niches. That is to say, as a result of evolution, I would believe, it has found a survival pattern of life within the physical environment, which is deterministic. And often in evolutionary theory, a key example that's given is the species of warblers, in that within the conifer tree, each subspecies of warbler fits into a sort of ecological niche in the sense it gets the resources for its survival from a particular part of the conifer tree. And they found out generally within evolution, each successful species can be understood as being the only successful species within a particular ecological niche. And this has been repeated many, many times in terms of understanding and defining species. And that is the case with animals below human beings, that is how they are understood. We're going to come to a moment about whether humans can be understood that way, but that means that anything that's understood that way is determined by its niche through evolution. It's not a free thing, even though it may be very sophisticated. And here's a little diagram that's used within biology to describe the sort of layers of niches, which the ecosystem is one, the biome and the biosphere. There are sort of layers upon layers. And another diagram there going right down to the biome, which is the Earth. It's all a beautifully ordered, layered onion, if you like, our cosmos, in which things fit within their niche as evolution progresses to more sophisticated animals. Okay, so there we are. That's the first one, that I'm just claiming matter is not free. The second premise is humans are free. Humans have free will. And two pieces of evidence I just want to give here. One I'm calling objective, the other I'm calling subjective. The objective is, in terms of those niches I was just talking about, humans go beyond them. We are the only species that characteristically transcends biological niches. And the other one, the second one, is subjective experience, that we have this experience of I could have chosen to do otherwise. Let's just quickly look at those two pieces of evidence. Here's the first one. I take my physical body beyond physical needs. There's a characteristic human thing, which is to climb a mountain. Why climb a mountain? Well, because it's there. We like to explore, go beyond any niche, purely, sometimes it seems, just for the desire to explore and go beyond limits and move towards the absolute. I range freely across my environment for goals which I create, beyond physical instincts, beyond survival needs. I've transcended the basic dynamic of natural selection there, for good or for ill as well. I have a moral choice in the way in which I live. Give me a limit and I think beyond it. Here's someone proving infinity. We yearn towards the absolute, to the ultimate. In fact, we discover we're only satisfied by the absolute. This is the human condition. This is some objective behavior for the fact that we're not a determined species. Okay, so possible objections to that can be that if you take, so one objection is that human action, however creative, is still within the physical environment, of course. Perhaps there are still survival needs to human behavior when we go to the moon or something like that. My reply here is it is indeed true that human intentions and mind cannot ignore the body's biological needs and limits, but The behavior and language which results from self-conscious intentions always exhibits purposes beyond such survival needs and niche limits. Okay. Another possible objection is natural selection is ultimately random. I mean, I would dispute that, actually, that evolution is random. The environment's not random. The balance between the seeking living thing and its environment is a highly meaningful and balanced process. So that's highly debatable. But for my purposes, all I need to note for this argument really is that its evolution is clearly constructive. It is creative of fruitful ecosystems, which give meaning and definition to the things within it. Okay, I put a little map there of the development of the brain. It's interesting when you get to the human species, the size of the brain massively increases, particularly relative to the programming you get from the environment. I might come back to that, but that's quite a significant dynamic within evolution, that the human brain seems to need further programming, further specification than just the physical environment. Okay, so there, the second part of the evidence for this second premise, that humans have free will, I call a subjective experience. So this isn't just based on looking at the fact I go beyond niches. This is my internal experience here, that I experience myself making intelligent choices about values and intentionally acting my body on that basis. I experience that I could have done otherwise. I put a photo here of the first person perspective here. That's what we're trying to understand now, because this has often been forgotten in our culture, that there aren't just things out there. There's the human person with his intelligence and his subjective experience and his ability to love, to be free. Here's from the film The Matrix, there's Neo looking at himself from the first person perspective, looking at that guy, whose name just escapes me for a moment, and who is offering him the red pill or the blue pill. Do you want to know what real life is like, or are you going to stay in the Matrix where it's comfortable but not real? What do you want? Do you want truth or do you want comfort? And of course he chooses, there he is choosing, he's looking at himself here, about to make that choice, that act of choice, of reality, of truth is the best choice. But whatever, he has the ability to choose, to be responsible. We are responsible human beings. Our whole legal system is based upon that. Common objections to that: freedom is an illusion. There are only material powers. Another one is there are always reasons for why we do things, perhaps complex. These may not be obvious, but cause our actions. So there is a movement today saying freedom is an illusion. We're not really free. Some of these thinkers, quite a few of these thinkers, even say that subjective consciousness is an illusion, which is a fairly extraordinary thing. I don't think it could have happened without maybe, I've put here, the 17th century thinkers who said all there, really tried to emphasize all there is matter. That's the only way, and therefore minds must be reducible to matter. People like Hobbes said that. And but my answer to that is that, human self-determination and responsibility is a fundamental experience. Is there any other meaning without recognizing that we hold each other responsible? It's, certainly you take away human consciousness, you take away everything, all our knowledge, take away human free will, you take away the meaning of our society and of our actions, and really the intelligibility of every moment of our experience. You can't be conscious without having a sense of right and wrong and of a need to act, even if it's just to listen to me now. And similarly, I just revert back to my objective evidence that we are not satisfied with matter. We transcend our ecological niches. So it's not just subjective evidence. We also have objective evidence based on human behavior that humans are free. Another one is there are always reasons for why we want and do things, perhaps complex. So if there's a reason for why you are being nice to your mother, or a reason why you're being nasty to your brother, or a reason why you're choosing to fast today, or you're choosing to eat a lot today, well, that means you're not free. That's what they sort of say. But I think that is a false analysis of our experience. Yet, it is true, we usually do have reasons, unless we act randomly, but we create our own reasons and our own evaluations of risk, trust, generosity, etc. We self-determine the type of person we are. Why do we act like that? Because I want to is the ultimate answer. And if someone keeps saying, well, why do you want to? Ultimately, it's because I want to. So that is the second premise there. And the conclusion is human free will is not a material power. Catholics believe we have a spiritual soul. That's our teaching. This is a rational belief. Just to finish off, the move towards a bit more rapidly now. The third premise is love is freely willing the good of the other. Okay, so that is what we are going to move to now. Love is freely winning the good of the other. If a human looking being, might be a robot, if a human looking being says, I love you, but it turns out you are pointing a gun at them or are a zombie or an actor in the Truman Show, you don't believe them, do you? The meaning of the word love ultimately is something that is willed by the other person. Love puts the other first, ultimately, true love. It's at the heart of human meaning and existence. And it reveals the other's importance. We reveal that through the eyes often, or through words. That is the meaning of love. Some people, objections to that might be that love is purely a feeling, and therefore if we have a nice feeling towards someone we love, but that doesn't capture the wholeness of love. Love is based upon the truth and goodness of the other, discerned and revealed by the lover. So we discern and reveal someone else's value to them when we truly love. Feelings may follow, feelings may precede, of course, but good feelings can be reduced by a range of factors. You can't reduce the free act of serving another and revealing to them their dignity to feelings. Okay, another one is love is self-centered, it always wants a return. Well, no, you know, again, our subjective, if you like, experience of love is that we're prepared to act generously, putting the other first. Again, truth in love is more important than comfort. Love is to find the reality of the other person, and indeed to share ultimately that ultimate reality of human communion. Okay, so far, excuse me, we have this syllogism: humans have free will, matter is not free, therefore human free will is not a material power. And then I've just done, love is freely willing the good of the other at its heart. That is the definition of the catechism, Catholic catechism actually. Therefore loving is not a material power. Okay, finally, robots are purely material things. Okay, here we go. Robots based upon digital computer technology are purely matter. They have hardware and software. The hardware is their matter is basically electric charge stored in capacitors, interacting via transistors. This is its natural components and relationships and meanings. Then it also has what we call software. These electrons and interactions are formed into patterns by human programming. Programs mimic intelligent behaviors. The meanings of these patterns come from free, intelligent human interactions, not physical natures. The way in which the software falls upon the hardware is determined by human beings. There's no intrinsic link between those two things. So the hardware cannot actually understand, can't even have awareness of what's going on, because the connection with the outside world is through software and the human programmer, let alone freedom, because it's physical. So there's a hardware-software divide. There's no subjective awareness or free intention in these electric charges stored in capacitors, arranged cleverly by human beings. One way to show this, there's a philosopher called John Searle who has shown this famously with this image that has stood the test of time, actually, over a couple of decades, I think, called the Chinese room, where he says that if you imagine a room in which there's a human being who speaks English, but does not speak Chinese, but he has a book here for translating sets of 3 Chinese symbols into another 3 Chinese symbols that he's going to put outside here. It's a rule book. produced by a Chinese person. And this person is Chinese. He puts 3 symbols in, maybe a question like, are you enjoying yourself in there? And this book tells him to put 3 things out which say, yes, I am enjoying myself here. And this person walks around and gets that. And then he might say, what color is your hair? Well, my hair is green. And then he might say all sorts of things. And this person eventually gets the experience of communicating with something which speaks Chinese. He feels that there's an understanding of Chinese here, but there is no understanding of Chinese, because all there is an English person manipulating a rule book. This is, the hardware is everything you can see. The software is the meaning that is in the symbols, the Chinese characters, and their connection with English symbols. But that is put there by someone outside who knew Chinese. Okay, so another way of putting this, their hardware is electrons, capacitors, etc. Their software is like a rule book. This is computers, digital computers. You can predict computers. No one can map future choices of human beings because they are not determined. You can predict computers. You can't predict humans. Were the Chinese room to come out with this word, I experienced that I could have chosen otherwise. Or were a robot to be asked, could you choose otherwise? And it said yes, it would be telling a lie, basically. So it's triply false. There's no subjective experience in the hardware because it hasn't come through evolution in intimate relationship with its ecosystem and niche over billions of years, nor can it have chosen. It doesn't have free will either. Okay, objections to the point that I've made there. What if no human can understand or predict a computer? Couldn't it be so complex or something? Well, yeah, okay, that's probably quite true. And we're already at that point. We're certainly going to get even more like that. But that is just to do with complexity, not freedom. If you have another faster digital computer with the same software, any hardware, in fact, and manage to give same inputs, you can predict what the first will do. So it is potentially predictable, a computer, whereas humans are not. Another objection might be, why should an immaterial component of humans, which we call the soul, directly in the image of God, not in a similar manner become part of a robot? Reply, it seems that the soul becomes part of the organism at the height of biological evolution. I was mentioning the brain earlier, when the brain gets too big to be controlled by a niche, by a purely biological niche. With the biggest brain fine-tuned to the organic environments over 4 billion years, it seems that awareness is linked to this. The software-hardware divide is not part of that. So what I'm saying here is, well, you couldn't even have awareness. And then it seems that in the plan of God, he immediately creates human souls into the human species, into a species that has a sophisticated brain and a sophisticated awareness. So digital computers don't have that. So we would not in any sense expect the soul to be given to a digital computer, a robot, however complex and clever it was. So here is the argument again. Humans have free will, matter is not free, therefore the power of freedom is not a material power. Love is freely willing the good of the other, therefore loving is not a material power. Robots are purely material things, therefore robots cannot love. It is false, this movement that is claiming that it can. And I've put a little NB here. Might we not be able to tell? That is to say, could the person sitting next to you, if you've got someone, or or even me, could I just be a robot? How can you tell that I'm not a robot? This is called passing the Turing test. Will there be a test where a clever test where you can't tell the difference between a human and a robot, and therefore we'd have to call a robot humans? Well, no, we might get close to that, but it doesn't, I would say possibly, but if one, we are not allowed to know its makeup. So if we can know its makeup and know, is this a digital computer, or is this something that is biologically a member of the human species? That is, if we're not allowed to know that, it might prove to be difficult to know whether or not it's a human or not. That is true, but that doesn't mean that it is human. And if we know its makeup, we'll be able to determine. But also, the robot would have to lie about being free. When we ask it, could you have done otherwise? It would have to lie to us, and that will put us back in the Truman Show, if you like. Can you tell if your best friend is lying about being friends? Well, there are ways, I think, where we, as we get closer to people, we believe our intuition does kick in, but that's probably another talk. So, we don't want to be in the Truman Show. Therefore, we don't want them to start developing robots based on this false philosophy that there is nothing spiritual about the human being, because that will lead them in the wrong direction. Not least, it's, they're starting to say we should give rights to robots, and the whole ethical debate is going to be skewed unless we get the human person right and the robot right. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Father, for this very thorough and scientifically based talk. And I'm sure there will be questions from people. So what time is it now? It's 22. So we've got some time for questions. So people, please go ahead. Okay, I'll break the ice. I've got one.
Yeah.
So where do you think people now, I mean, not necessarily, let's say, this Japanese professor or Musk or the Google engineer, but like normal, I mean, everyone on the street, where do you think is caught in a trap? So where do you think he wouldn't accept your arguments? So where do you think modern, let's say, society does not recognize?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I think from my understanding, I think academic philosophers are going to come at it, I think, from the freedom thing, because there is this movement which says that freedom is an illusion, and it's very prominent within the academic world. So I think sort of academic philosophers are going to say the weak point in my argument is the second premise, that humans are free, and therefore the whole argument falls down because we are not free. But having said that, the arguments they deal with are more just the subjective experience, and I haven't seen presented, in my opinion, the objective experience outside of the school of thought that I'm in enough to them. So I think that would be, I think people like Elon Musk and the Japanese professor, they are coming at it from Eastern philosophy, which tends to see freedom almost everywhere. They're sort of panpsychic, which is one thing that they see awareness everywhere. They see that Japanese professor says there's a soul everywhere. So they would deny the first premise. The Eastern thought on the whole would deny the first premise that matter is not free. But actually that involves denying science, I think, most of science. So that is where a lot of those people come from. So I think the Eastern people deny the first premise, Western academics will deny the second premise. But obviously my opinion is they're wrong. Matter's not free and humans are free, basically.
What about the fact that love is like commitment for the good of the other? Because sometimes these days people think that love is just a feeling. So this is more like, how can I say, it's been like accepted, without thinking about it. But
well, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. And would people like that accept the second premise, that we are truly free, but that freedom is not essential, at least to the high point of love? They might well, because love has been so corrupted in a hedonist society. You're absolutely right. So But that wouldn't be wouldn't be the sort of philosophers so much, or even those intelligent Eastern thought people or whatever, or even Elon Musk, maybe not so much. But I think there is within those who are sort of swept away by the hedonist society, they might accept the second premise, we are free, but love is just purely following your drives and your feelings. And therefore, ultimately, love is more about me than you, which is, of course, where our society is. So, yeah, I think in terms of the common populace, I think it might be the third premise that they deny. There is someone with a hand out there, I think.
Yes, so there is a question in the chat. I mean, if the person who asked it would like to ask it directly, otherwise we can read it directly from the chat, just to make it a bit more personal. Otherwise, I'm happy to read it on behalf of everybody. So
yeah, do that, yeah.
Okay, so the chat asks, Father, do you think that love converts into a matter after divorce? I mean, it loses free will.
It loses free will after a divorce. I mean, after a divorce, I would imagine that, yeah, you're sort of saying, well, I'm no longer committed to you, aren't you? So in that sense, you are still using your freedom, but in a sense, you're using your freedom to withdraw that which your freedom gave. So you're withdrawing the self-gift. So in that sense, I wouldn't say that it's the free will, excuse me, that is lost, but the orientation of your free intention is changed, I would suggest.
Very good. Have we got?
Whether Isabella may have had a question, did she? I don't know.
Hi, I've
ahead.
just
Yeah.
got one question. Can you hear me? Is my mic off? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, please.
So from I've spoken to a few of the PhD students who are using AI, and they seem to be kind of split into two groups. One who believes that it's going to help humanity and is a tool, and others who strongly believe that this is where evolution is going. And in fact, we're the top of the evolutionary chain at the moment as human beings, but next it will be artificial intelligence. So how do you discuss that in the light of what you've been saying?
Yeah. Well, I would say the first group, absolutely. I would be sort of with them in that, I believe science and technology is good, and robots, in as much as they're using science and technology morally, is good. Of course, that is the catch, is what ethical contexts are we placing upon science? That is one of the major questions for civilization in the scientific era, is what are the ethics? Do we believe in objective ethics? Where do we get them from? Catholics tend to use as you probably know, from what's called natural law theory, based on reason, and also revelation, based on what Jesus Christ has said. But our culture doesn't want to go down particularly the latter route so much, and doesn't even really want to have objective morality based on human nature. So there's a big challenge, I think, to that first group, is to say, well, where are you getting your ethics from, and is it not pretty crucial that you have a coherent ethics? In terms of the second group, who just say that it's all part of evolution, that I would suggest that they are not accepting the second premise, that humans are free, and that therefore love is not a material power. And if they're just seeing the physical evolution, which I do believe in, as naturally continuing in the human person without the creation of the soul, and that therefore evolution, physical evolution, just continues and artificial intelligence is just part of that, it seems to me they probably, I would guess, don't believe in the soul. Once you have a soul, you don't have evolution in the same way in the plan of God, and indeed rationally speaking, because we're on a physical and spiritual realm now, and we're directly in the image of God. So I would imagine your second group are materialists about the human person, and therefore they reject the second premise and the third premise, and they get the nature of man wrong, and that is the bigger error, philosophically.
Hi, Father.
Mm.
Hi, I just wondered, I'm a big fan of Star Trek because it sort of asks some of these complex ethical questions. And there's the character I really like is Spock, who's a humanoid. So he's sort of like incapable of feeling human emotions. So he's kind of half human, half robot.
Yeah.
And it just brings to mind some kind of ethical questions about cloning and what will happen in the sort of next period of sort of biology where technology and humans will kind of sort of somehow mix, and we will start to clone body parts, and maybe even yeah, like maybe even birth people, you know, maybe even go to the point where we clone people for organs, etc. I just wanted a kind of overview, if you like, of the sort of like church's attitude to that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, obviously, you know, because the human species is body and soul, in the image of God, in the image of Jesus Christ, we, as I'm sure you know, we don't believe in any conception of something that will be a member of the human species or might be a member of the human species outside the womb of a mother committed to the father as a result of the marital act. The whole process is a sacred process. So anything, you know, which some of those things certainly fall within that, where they're experimenting with the creation of what might possibly be a human being. We don't know exactly, maybe, outside of its sacred, proper context for the creation of a new eternal being. Because if you have a spiritual soul, you're eternal. So a whole lot of that is immoral. A related question is, you know, will it be a human being? Will it have a human soul? You know, I remember when IVF was coming in, I'm old enough to remember that, and people were saying, will it have a human soul? And, you know, I think the rational and somewhat traditional position is if it's a member of the human species, that is, you know, if it's biologically such that it's going to have the type of brain size that we have, then God, in his wise plan, has always, you know, it's part of his plan that that type of brain will have a soul to control it. So IVF, clearly God does create a soul into those who are produced by a seriously immoral process of starting a new eternal life in a petri dish. But he does create a human soul, and from other awful acts such as rape or whatever, he does create a human soul. Wherever it's a member of the human species, he does create a human soul. Whether these hybrids or these Spock things, that is a biological question about whether it's an individual member of the human species whose brain has outstripped the power of the ecological niche to control it, I would say. So that's a couple of angles on some of this.
Spock's unable to feel love, but he does fall in love, and he finds it very confusing, and ultimately chooses not to act on it because he rationales that he doesn't understand what love is. So he would follow your thesis, I think.
I mean, that's a clever thing. I mean, if he's free, then he is free to love, and his confusion about it and his fear of it is all to do with the wounds in his earlier life. Because if he is able to love at all, then he's called to love totally. And, you know, there is no difference between being not free. You know, there's no middle way ultimately between having the power of freedom and being deterministic in the way God has made it. There are only two ways of existing. One is material and the other is spiritual. And there isn't a sort of, you know, a third type of existence, so, you know, except in science fiction.
Thanks. Are you familiar with C.S. Lewis's book, the other, is it The Dark Planet, The Other Side of the Dark Planet?
He did 3 science
trilogy, yeah.
for adults, and they're great stuff. Yeah, Perilandra is one where he posits a new Adam and Eve, God starting a new human race on another planet, and the devil trying to get Eve to fall. And there's this character throughout, isn't there? Lord Winston, who is a monist, who does not believe in the spiritual side. He's a materialist. And C.S. Lewis is very good on the philosophy of this, of showing how dangerous it is not to believe in the soul, not to believe that there is a non-material realm of existence called spirit, the realm of knowing and loving. And this guy, I think it's Winston in that trilogy, is a modern materialist, like many of our thinkers today, and therefore he thinks human beings are just purely physical, just at the high point of evolution. And C.S. Lewis brings out how that's really dangerous in those novels. He brings out how you end up losing the distinction between good and evil, and that's an interesting, that's another talk. But it is happening, I think, in our society, and you certainly don't, you end up being a sort of pantheist and whatever. So belief in the soul is important. The spiritual soul.
Thanks, Father.
Yeah, for any culture, to understand the human person. Yeah.
Any other question?
There's a question there. What about slides, isn't there? Yeah, I'm sure we can.
Yes. So I think more than one person will be interested in getting the slides. So Father, I think, can send them to me, and we can also, we are recording the talk, so we can share that as well. So for those who are interested, I can post in the chat the email of the group. So
did Isabella have another question there, or I don't know whether you had your hand up.
No, I mean, please go ahead. I mean, whoever's got questions, please go ahead.
But Angie put a question actually on the chat as well.
Yeah, has been answered before. Unless there is a new one. No, right. I think it's been answered before.
Is that Isabella? Is that you, Isabella? I don't know.
Have I still got my hand raised, Father?
I did. I thought you did. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I saw your finger there or something, though.
Oh, I'm just playing around trying to see what's in the chat. I think the biggest problem with my friends is basically they don't believe in the soul, so it's very hard to. Yeah,
the soul. The soul has had a lot of bad press, generally, and I think one of my objections, I touched on it. There's this sort of assumption that the only type of causation is material causation. Billiard balls knocking each other, kinetic energy. Therefore, there's a sort of, they end up when I say to them, well, humans are free and intelligent and creative, and that's a type of causation. They're already predisposed against that because they've been told, well, there's only one type of causation, not two, not a sort of, the spiritual causation, godlike, creative causation that humans do when we create things and when we. So one of the things is to try and get them to be aware of that. More recently, sometimes said, well, neuroscience shows nothing amazing anyway in human behavior. So even if there was this other type of causation, neuroscience shows that it's all just material causation. But actually, that's not quite true. One, because you have to look at human behavior, and we are always yearning for the absolute. We are always transcending, and we do create, and we do pollute, and we do sin. And so we are not, our actual behavior is not material, really, purely. But also neuroscience is at a very early stage, and certainly, the soul at a high level, I think, does affect the brain. To work out exactly how that will show up in 1,000 years when neuroscience is far more developed, But certainly, you know, at the heart of it is if I decide to raise my arm, that decision leads to my arm raising. So there is a type of causation from conscious decision into the body. Now they obviously will have arguments against that, and the academics do, but I think they're wrong. And you know, I've touched on it in one or two of the objections there. You know, but so the soul has had a bad press, and it needs to, you know, be rejuvenated. But there is a slow movement within academic, secular philosophy of mind that is saying we've been far too reductionist, and really prominent people are saying that now. You know, 20, 30 years ago, most academic philosophers were all, they were 90% were physicalists. That is to say, they said you can reduce even consciousness to hormones, and certainly love and freedom to hormones. Now, the latest poll, they only had about 54% who said that. So there is a move to say human consciousness and freedom is more mysterious than was realized in the last few centuries. So, you know, there are opportunities, there are openings, I think, to rediscovering the science, rediscovering the soul. But we do need to be open to modern science, I think, and you know, try and engage with these discussions a bit.
So we're approaching 9 o'clock, so maybe there is just time for a final question.
Just finally, how do you think in the future it's going to affect the church, having a greater AI kind of technology within society? Will it be something that would affect the church and our way of worship, or
well, you know, yeah, it's difficult to say. I mean, I mentioned the chief Google engineer there saying, well, you know, the sort of access that we have now on the internet, we're going to have immediately within our brains somehow, possibly. So that will affect the whole of culture. And of course, the technological revolution has already affected culture. So I think your question really perhaps just reduces again to science. You know, since experimental method came in the 18th century, technology has just taken off, and it's transformed the way we live, and therefore the philosophy of science is very important. And unfortunately, secular philosophy of science took off, and Catholics were not particularly interested in science, and I think that was a mistake. And it's led to an increase in atheism, and that, you know, because Catholics believe you can prove God by reason, you can prove the soul by reason. I've touched on that tonight. And yet it doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen in our confirmation courses. It doesn't happen in our catechesis. Meanwhile, the world is catechizing, the world is evangelizing, and the world is using science to show that we are just material. We're just part of evolution. The world is using philosophy of science to show that God does not exist. And that has ripped the culture out of our hands. And that's going to continue, I would say, until we work a little bit harder at apologetics and reproducing, you know, evidence for God updated. We can't just rely on the pre-science arguments, which were very good for their science. They were based on science as well. But we now see the world as much more interconnected than the Greek science did. And we need to use that sense of that discovery of interconnection within the world to show that God exists and that we have a soul, I think, in order to re-evangelize the culture. That's one aspect. Obviously, there are numerous other charisms that are needed as well. But one aspect is to not allow ourselves to become fideists. You know, we can learn a lot from Protestants, but ultimately they don't have the tradition of faith and reason that Catholics have. And we must be careful not to lose that tradition, that we believe revelation for supernatural revelation fulfills natural revelation. The Bible and the church's teachings build upon reason.
Thank you.
Okay, so I believe it's time to call the evening to a close. It was very interesting. I really thank Father Hugh for this beautiful talk. And I posted, I believe, in the chat the email of the group. So anyone who is interested, they can send an email to the, whether they're registered or not already, they can do that also if they want to be kept abreast of the following talks and what we're going to do for Pure in Heart. And please ask for the recording and or the slides. I can get them from Father Hugh. So just a final note for those who might have joined after 8 o'clock. So there is going to be a history walk and final going to the pub afterwards on this coming Sunday, the 13th of September. So the meeting point is Holy Redeemer Catholic Church, 4 p.m. So in the afternoon, SW3. And the history walk will be led by Joanna Bogle, whom I'm sure everyone knows. We have had her many times speaking at Pure in Heart. So 4 p.m. on Sunday, meeting point, Holy Redeemer Catholic Church. Next tube station is Sloane Square. So I think now we can have a final prayer and the blessing from Father.
Yeah, okay. Well, we thank you, Almighty Father, for this gathering. Give us what we need to grow in this coming week. Give us the gifts we need to be healed in order to show your truth and love. We ask you to bless all those who have been part of this gathering. Perhaps finish with a prayer to Our Lady, whose birthday was yesterday. So we say, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. The Lord be with you. May the blessing of Almighty God through the intercession of Our Lady and all the saints and all the angels come down upon you and remain always with you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let us bless the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you very much, Father. And so we will reconvene next.
Thank you very much, Father.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Father. That was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great, enjoyed it.
Joining us at just very short notice, or just a week. So thanks a lot for agreeing to give a talk. And maybe we'll reconvene another time in a few weeks, months. So we're planning to reopen the live meeting. So not just through Zoom, but so we're working on the logistics. But it's going to be possible still in the at the usual premises close to High Street Kensington Station. So hopefully soon we will start again the usual meetings, of course, with due precautions. So maybe you can come in person in a few weeks or months.
Yeah.
So have a good night, everybody, and see you next week on Wednesday online.
Bye. Thank you again very much, Father.
See you on Sunday.
Bye, everyone.
Or on Sunday, yes. I will be flying on Sunday, I'm afraid, so I will miss Joanna's walk, I'm afraid. I will be flying back to London on Sunday, so I'm so sad I will miss that.
It's good fun, those walks. They're good fun.
Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sad I will miss that, but exactly when I'm flying back to the UK. So I will be on a plane going to Luton Airport at the time. So okay, so good night, everybody, and
good night. Thanks.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night,
everyone.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.